Welcome to Cleveland Conversations. My name is Rob Whitbread, and I will be your host for this episode. O.J. Simpson recently died, and for those of us of a given age, this was, of course, one of the great media spectacles of our time, beginning with the slow-motion Bronco chase, ending with a televised trial that people are still talking about to this day. But with Mr. Simpson's passing, another issue was brought to the forefront again, and that is one of the challenges of our legal system, which is, depending on how much wealth or means you have, the quality of the representation that you may receive may be dependent upon that. Well, what we were looking to do with this episode is a lot has been talked about with what happens during a trial itself, and perhaps a public defender falling asleep during a trial or things along those lines. But what hasn't been talked about as much is the importance of what happens before a trial takes place and then after a trial may have taken place. And we are privileged to have, and very fortunate to have, two experts which can talk to us about some of these issues. So first, I would like to introduce Robert Triozzi, who, in addition to being an accomplished defense attorney and previously the law director of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, he's also currently a faculty member in the CSU Law College, as well as the co-director of the Criminal Justice Center in the college. Our second guest is Khalida Jackson, who has been a public defender for Cuyahoga County as well as the Northern District of Ohio, and she is currently the director of the Pardon, Clemency, and Reentry Clinic for CSU Law. So welcome to you both.
Morning.
Morning.
So I'd like to begin with you, Robert, just with some basic definitions for our viewers who may not be as well versed in this as you are. So your primary focus is on what happens before a trial takes place or before a plea agreement is reached. What do you mean when you say pretrial justice?
Well, you're right. I mean, when we talk about issues of justice, we always focus on the back end, and we're always concerned about mass incarceration. You know, how we in America here lead the world in the number of people that we incarcerate. Mm-hmm. And when you begin analyzing and trying to find answers for that, statistic, you begin to understand that it's not the result of any one thing that happens in the criminal justice system. A lot of our focus is on sentencing. Mm-hmm. When you look at the issue, it really starts at the front end. You know, all along the pathway where people are in place, system actors exercise discretion. They have choices to make, and they'd make decisions one way or the other. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it starts with arrest in the cases that come into in the criminal justice system, but it also impacts the charging decision. You know, the discretion the prosecutors exercise to actually identify which cases to come in. Mm-hmm. But once it gets into the court system, there are a lot of steps along the way, ever before you get to a conviction and sentencing that define the whole trajectory of the case. You know, it starts really on the first day with the bail decision, you know, because it has such tremendous impact on the trajectory a case is going to take, of all the consequences and the differences that occur between somebody who can afford to make bail and those that can't.
Yeah, talk about a little bit more about that from your experience, some of the things you've seen.
Well, sure. I think the best way to explain it, Rob, is to think about what would happen if, let me just say, speak for myself. If one of my kids got arrested today, what would tomorrow look like? You know, they would have a retained lawyer who's primary, almost entirely focused on getting my child out of jail. Going to the jail, interviewing, getting all the facts that are pertinent to pretrial release, getting the information about anchors of stability that my child, he's working, or he's got all of these factors going on in his life as to why he should be, as the case progresses, he shouldn't have to sit in jail, but he can be back out in the community to do two important things. One is to assist in his own defense, you know, because that's critically important. Any lawyer will tell you, you know, the value in representing somebody, how beneficial it is to have your client readily available to you. And the second component is, you know, preparing not only for the outcome of a trial or the factual determination, but what happens long term, you know, the mitigating factors. A lot easier down the road to make a case for some alternative to incarceration if you're working, or if you're already in treatment, or you already have these community connections. So that first decision that gets made, whether you're in jail or out of jail, defines the trajectory of a case from the outset.
And just make sure our viewers know the difference between prison and jail.
Yeah, well, prisons are the state penal institution. Prisons are where you go to if you commit a felony. Prisons are where you go to serve out your felony sentence. Jails are local, the county jail. In county jail, you can actually serve sentences for misdemeanors and low-level felonies. But our jails are primarily pre-trial detention centers. Most people in every county jail everywhere are in jail not to be serving. They're presumed innocent. They haven't been convicted of anything. But they're there because they can't make bail, and they're waiting the ultimate determination of their case. So a jail, while it is in good part a sentencing facility, it is mostly a pretrial detention center.
Great, thank you. And Khalida, your focus is on the other end of the spectrum, if you will, which is what happens after a trial has taken place, someone has reached a plea agreement, whatever, some punitive sanction may have been taken, something along those lines. And in your center, you focus on on pardons, clemency, record expungement. Could you explain the difference between those things?
Certainly. Well, clemency is like the overarching, it covers everything. It includes pardons, it includes record sealings, and it includes expungements. So branches of that is what I'll explain. A pardon it's almost like a forgiveness that you receive from the governor or from the executive branch. Some people will receive pardons from the president for federal crimes, but for state crimes, you receive it from the governor. And so with that forgiveness, you are able to restore the disabilities, or like, for instance, carrying a firearm. That can be a restored right that you have that you lost by being a convicted felon. Record sealing, consider it like a lockbox, and some people have the combination to it, right? But then there are some exceptions to record sealing. Like if you work with children, nursing, some sex offenses, some offenses of violence. And then with an expungement, it is a complete eraser of your criminal conviction.
Thank you. And do you see some of the same dynamics in the things you focus on that Robert spoke to?
Well, I think the outcome of the case certainly reflects, in terms of a sentence, can certainly reflect what happened during the case. So when it's in its pretrial phase or its trial phase. So for instance, I have had clients that have had really negative outcomes in their case that was based off of the lack of resources or their interaction. It could be a number of different things. But definitely probably with the lack of resources. So with the conviction that they have, that can then determine what resource they can get, or what remedy, they can get for that conviction. So I think it does play a factor in some sense.
Okay. And Robert, you have already talked a little bit about this as far as what the process can look like for different persons. What are the implications with this? Because what you're saying to me is that one person can be charged with the exact same thing as another person and have dramatically different treatments and different types of things that may occur. So can you talk about some of these specific things? Length of time in jail, ability to make bail. Are there examples from your experience that help our audience understand how serious this can be?
Well, sure. I mean, the cases are designed with an eye toward the ultimate outcome in a case. But along the way, there are all the mechanisms that shape that. Plea bargaining. Most cases in our system do not go to trial. 95% of cases end up in a plea bargain. But so much goes into kind of defining and characterizing what that plea bargain is going to be, and ultimately what that sentence is going to be at the end of the day. The difference is that when you look at when you look at the data, you are more likely, the data will show, you're more likely to plead guilty to a higher offense if you're in jail because of the hope that you're going to get out of jail. The data also suggests, this is the area which is really complicated for the criminal justice system, you're more likely to plead guilty to something you didn't do if you're in jail. All the data suggests that that's the key factor of why people are put in that position, will end up pleading guilty to something that they didn't do. It's hard to explain, but that's the motivation. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to, even depending on what that plea bargain is going to be and what you actually are convicted of, you're more likely to go to jail. You're sentenced to prison if you're in pretrial detention. All the data suggests this. The reasons is because, like I said at the outset, you are not well prepared to argue for a probation or community control sanctions if you're in jail, because you haven't been working, you haven't been in school, you haven't been doing the things that typically a judge will consider at the sentencing time. So you're more likely to go to prison. And the most counterintuitive statistic, data point, is that because all of our system, aspects of our system, is designed to improve the recidivism rate. We don't want people coming through the system only to come back in. Mm-hmm. The longer you are in pretrial detention, the more likely it is that you're to come back into the system. The reason for that is that being in jail is destabilizing. And all of the anchors of stability you have in your life have dissipated, and so it's not surprising that if you're just putting people right back in after a term in jail,
your job when you're
right. And so if our system is designed, to improve recidivism rates, it's we're not achieving that goal because of pretrial detention. It's a very important issue because of the disparate results that you get from on that fact alone, in jail or out of jail while you're in pretrial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, just to reemphasize, these are people that have not been convicted of anything,
right.
Anything yet. Yeah. Right. Wow. Khalida, how, in your experience, the pursuit of a pardon, the pursuit of clemency, record expungement, whatever direction that somebody may choose to go in your experience, how does that process vary depending on the resources someone may have to pursue those objectives?
Well, the laws have changed significantly. So I answer this question in terms of someone who's able to pursue it now versus even just a year ago. Senate Bill 288 passed April, I think 4th or 3rd of 2023. That then it was amended in October. So the reason why I bring that up is because the expungement laws are incredibly expansive, more than what they've ever been. Actually, expungements didn't really exist until 2023. We called them expungements, but really they were sealings. So now with there being actual expungements and record sealings for even people who have had cases dismissed, I mean, the opportunity is incredible. And then with pardons, our clinic is a service provider for the Ohio Governor's Expedited Pardon Project. The reason why I bring that up is because it allows a pathway for people to receive pardons within 12 to 18 months. And that started in 2019. Before, people would apply for a pardon and wait years. So now with this Expedited Pardon Project, you have counsel, you have counsel for your application, and then you get assistance with completing the application. So making sure all the forms are right, and you're also guaranteed a hearing. So that is major. It's more so people just knowing about it and then finding the right avenue or the person to help them through the process.
And speak about why this is so important. Because Robert mentioned people repeatedly entering the system and the like. It sounds like you're most directly looking at what, somebody re-entering society, so to speak. Speak about the importance of that.
Well, I mean, it's important because criminal convictions, I mean, let me just be blunt, are a scarlet letter, right? And it creates a number of barriers for people to receive certain licensing and jobs. So to best serve or address that issue is to give them avenues to remove those restrictions, to remove those barriers. So that's incredibly important in terms of trying to create or trying to prevent people from re-entering the system. If they have their criminal convictions either sealed, removed, or pardoned, that allows them better job opportunities, better money, just more things. So then that way, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but it completely, or at least decrease significantly, them re-entering back in the system when they have those remedies.
And let me ask both of you this question. What happens when a law changes? So marijuana laws or various other sorts of things where somebody got into trouble from a law that has now changed, where the exact same behavior is no longer considered illegal. How does all that work? Do they automatically get their records expunged, or do they automatically get released from prison or jail? What does that look like?
Well, you want me to answer this? Or you want to do
No, go right ahead.
Well, I'm going to say the lawyer answer. It depends, because it depends on when the offense was committed by that person versus when the law changed. So, I think with the marijuana law, I think my understanding from attending a legislative update, there are remedies that are being sought out for people to get, I think, their minor misdemeanor or some marijuana-related convictions sealed. However, when I say it depends, is because it depends on what other things may have happened with that case. And it's nothing automatic. It's something that you do have to apply for. There has to be a background check. There has to be a report done. And then the state has an opportunity to object. So nothing's automatic. It's still a process despite the laws being changed. Now, in terms of people knowing when those laws change, I think CSU is trying to be CSU College of Law is trying to be a great vehicle for that, especially our clinics. We are trying to be in the community so that way we can inform people of these current law changes and what we can do to help them with that.
Yeah, I like that you asked that question, because one of the things that kind of often goes under the radar when I talked about system actors and the role that they have by exercise of decisions and discretion. The legislature is a major system actor in criminal justice. They set the rules of the game. They set the parameter both in terms of what offenses are and what they're not, also what the sentencing prerogatives might be. And they have they clearly have a role in shaping or perhaps reshaping criminal justice in our community. They are clearly a significant system actor when it comes in the area of criminal justice.
Absolutely.
And again, this question is to both of you, which is, what are the implications of this? I mean, the implications of what you're speaking to for the individual and their direct families are pretty readily apparent. But what about the wider community? What about the secondary effects? What about Greater Cleveland as a whole? What are the implications when somebody is put in a position where their life is upended over something that could have been managed, let's just say from one perspective, more reasonably?
Well, it's clear. I mean, the criminal justice system has a couple of key responsibilities. First and foremost, of course, it's holding people accountable for their acts. It is something that the community expects out of the system, that people are held accountable. But when you're in the system, that means two different things. One is, how do we address your personal accountability for what you did? But the system is also wants us to think about what's going to happen next. As a result of you being in the criminal justice system, how meaningful was this response? So much of the decision making is trying to protect the community from repeat behavior, the recidivism. And so that's really a true measure what the community expects is a meaningful response. And if you're not paying attention to the reintegration into the society, to the reentry issues, or even from the bail perspective of how you reintegrate somebody back into the community while their case is pending, you're failing on that expectation. We're not doing a good enough job to put in place those mechanisms that help people reorient themselves, so that they don't flow back into the system. I mean, that's really what the key expectation I think that the community has.
Yeah, Khalida?
I mean, I don't have much to add from that. Bob covered it all with that. I don't have really anything to add to that. I think he covered it all.
Okay. And I have to ask this question. What do you say to somebody who takes a hard line on this? The quote unquote, you did the crime, you did the time. why should this be a concern? Why should these resources be thrown at that? How do you respond to somebody who may take that attitude?
Well, I think that's a very oversimplistic view of the system and of that individual, right? So with someone being accused and then later convicted of a crime, as Bob kind of said before, depends on the events that led up to that moment, what happened during pretrial detention, what happened during sentencing, and then what happens post-sentencing. Someone who's gone to prison or been incarcerated, it's not like they have like a Men in Black thing and everything's just, erased from their mind when they get out of prison. There is some trauma that comes from incarceration than having a criminal conviction. So I think our system is meant, the Constitution is meant to protect the people, right? Like, you're entitled to an attorney and everyone's supposed to be treated fairly and equally under the law. So to just say that someone committed a crime, you did the time, then it's done, it's like, no. There's more to that. There's more to that person's future, because there was a story that happened before they got there, and there's a story after they leave from that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, I think for everybody, the system is always about the other. I think this individual that you've described here, if this again was one of their kids or a family member, they may have a different idea of what, at least the level of concern. But even if that's not the case, as I indicated previously, is that if the system is not successful, for instance, if 75% of the people going to prison recidivate within 3 or 4 years, that's a failure. So and that impacts public safety. It impacts community well-being. So that individual you describe may think it is not about them, but ultimately it is. Mm-hmm. If the system isn't working to make you feel safer, or if the system isn't designed to treat people equitably, it does impact you. Both your life and your identity as a citizen of this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's fascinating about your answers is you seem to speak about two different things. One is the more humanistic element. These are human beings that are in the system and have a long life, hopefully after they are released or whatever the case may be. And you're speaking to some of the more pragmatic, almost economic realities as far as these given sorts of things. Now, let's talk a little bit about what your centers are doing. So you've got, for viewers who aren't aware, University of Cincinnati has had a focus area in this for quite a while, and CSU Law has relatively recently opened up some centers and things focusing on those things. So why don't we go ahead and start with Robert. Talk a little bit about what your center is, what you're doing to try to help address some of these things.
Well, the Criminal Justice Center itself is broad-based. Our charge is to address every issue, every criminal justice-related issue that our community confronts. And one way of looking at it is that there's a whole number of pretrial justice issues that we need to focus on, and then the post-conviction side. So I'm the clinic that I run at the law school is designed on the pretrial side. Khalida's is on the post-conviction. The center encompasses both ends. On the pretrial side, in all of our clinics, all of our effort are aimed at access to justice issues. There's a recognition that the level of advocacy on the aspects of the pretrial side, there's a lot of disparity, and certainly on the back end, where you no longer have a right to counsel on things, people have difficulty navigating the system. So our clinics are designed to increase the level of access to advocacy. My students are in court every day, working on the bail system, trying to even out, the way I described, the difference between somebody who has means and doesn't. So we're in court participating in the client interviews. We're there that very first day someone enters the court. We'll identify people that need help. We'll go to the jail and visit them, gather all the information necessary to enhance the level of advocacy that takes place in court. So from the pretrial side of things, that's what we're focused on, is increasing access to justice, through this level of advocacy.
And how do you go about identifying the folks who need your help?
Well, because we're in court, we know exactly what the judge has decided.
So you're monitoring the...
Yeah. So being part of the interview, we'll know whether somebody can afford or what they're able to afford, and we'll know. We've developed a pretty good handle on this person is going to be sitting in jail just because they're poor. And that's a person that we're going to focus on, and again, trying to elevate the level of representation that's available to them as the case goes through the system.
And let me just do one other follow-up, which is potentially a little bit more intrusive, let's call it. How are you working with the powers that be in the criminal justice system? So the attorneys for Cleveland or the attorneys for Cuyahoga County, is your work being received positively, or are you running into resistance?
Well, we have a strong relationship with the Office of the Public Defender, because we're in a position to be helpful to them. I believe that the most actors in the system, want to do what's right. So we get a very good reception from the judges and the prosecuting attorneys, because we're adding value. It's not as if we're doing anything to harm the system. Everyone is hoping for a better result, and if we're in a position, to provide that, it's a value to everybody. And then in the post-conviction side of things, you're doing the exact same thing. It's kind of the
little bit.
Yeah, please talk about your...
Sure. So, with our clinic, we definitely rely on our community partners. We have a partnership with the Office of Reentry. We also have a partnership with the Public Defender's Office, my former office. And then we have a partnership with also the Urban League recently. So, and then also with the ODRC, so the Ohio Department of Rehabilitations and Corrections. So starting this job, I would say I found it important to create bridges. So I think, and then creating a network, at least because it's about who you know, but then also understanding how the system works. So then also having my students work with these entities as well as working with clients to make sure people know what our clinic does, and then giving the students an opportunity to learn by creating I say air quotes because they're not attorneys yet, but having oral advocacy and then client relations type of relationships.
And how do you decide, not you personally necessarily, but in working with your students, colleagues, which cases to take on, which cases not to take on? Well, because I'm assuming that the demand for your services may be somewhat overwhelming at times. So
at times, well, with the Ohio Governor's Expedited Pardon Project, we're assigned cases, so we don't turn cases away. And then in terms of for the clemency part, expungements and record sealings, for anyone who's eligible, we will help. And if we can't help them, then we'll refer them. So when coming to this the clinic, we created Case Western Reserve. They have a second chance center. So we have a partnership with them in the PD's office, as well as legal aid. So we all kind of work together to see who can do what, when, how. So if we can't do it, then we refer them to another clinic to help them.
And finally, talk about your students. What are their motivations? What are their experiences in these? In this?
Students are very interested and passionate about the work. Obviously, there's something in it for them, the skill development, of being able to discover within themselves what they're good at or what they need to improve at. But you're also doing this kind of work and skill development by helping people. All right, and and by doing that, by actually having an impact in people's lives that are having difficulty with the criminal justice system, they're actually making the criminal justice system a little fairer, a little more equitable. And so the reaction from them is very positive. And it's not just for students interested in a career in criminal justice. All the students, they're interested in any number of careers. There's just a recognition that we all own the criminal justice system. And for the rest of their lives and their careers, this will be an important factor in whatever path they choose to pursue.
Yeah, the students are great. They are very passionate. I like to see when we will have a hearing and something they don't like. They'll be really opinionated about it. They'll ask questions. They'll press upon it. And I think just seeing that curiosity, but then also their willingness to see something change and calling out something that's unfair, I mean, that's very satisfying as a lawyer.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Robert Triozzi, Khalida Jackson, just absolute fascinating work. Again, I want to remind our viewers that both of our guests have had very prolific careers and have chosen to do this kind of thing in the service of the greater Cleveland community as well as the constituents that they're working for. So with that, thank you for viewing our program, and we hope that you enjoyed the show.